afternoon. Welcome to the 5th Annual OCLC Frederick G. Kilgour Lecture in Information Library Science. I'm Gary Martinini, Dean of the School of Information Library Science here at UNC, and I'm pleased to welcome you all. Each year we have the pleasure of bringing together distinguished guests and scholars who are making a difference in our field. We're honored today to hear from Dirks, a SILS alumnus who specializes in scholarly communications at Microsoft. Today we'll present the next generation scholarly communication ecosystem, implications for librarians. The OCLC Kilgour Lecture was established on Dr. Fred Kilgour's 90th birthday. It was presented from OCLC in 2004 to honor Dr. Kilgour's great accomplishments by creating an opportunity each year to share innovative ideas and cutting-edge research with the broader community. The School of Information and Library Science is grateful to OCLC, and especially to its president and chief executive officer, Jay Jordan, for this generous gift to the school that continues to allow an annual lecture as well as an opportunity to honor Fred for his insightful innovations to the world of libraries and digital and library users. Dr. Kilgour was a valued colleague who served as a distinguished research professor at SILS from 1986 to 2004. At that time, Fred had written over 200 scholarly papers, and he was still researching and writing right up to July of 2006 when he passed away. Fred was not only a great inventor and innovator, he and his wife, Eleanor, were also generous in other ways. For example, they established a development fund for SILS faculty that enables the school to provide better support for the needs of the faculty. With the fund, we're able to purchase innovative equipment, teaching materials, encourage new course development, and promote research in new areas. The fund provides for our faculty to present their research funding at conferences and courses. Dr. and Mrs. Kilgour's insight and generosity helped to enhance the school's prominence through better teaching and research. Fred brought many innovative gifts, such as WorldCat, to the information science and library world, but he was also a generous and thoughtful man who made a world of difference at SILS. His contributions have provided ongoing opportunities for our faculty and students and enriched our environment. One personal anecdote, when I first arrived here in 1998, Fred grabbed me, took me over to Davis Library and said, you know, they're going to retire the interlibrary loan cards and go electronic. They have valuable information on them. We might want to grab them. And so for a couple of years after that, as they systematically, each semester, were about to throw away the cards, I would take a little card over and bring a box of cards back. It took me a couple of years, but I finally got a couple of students to do a content analysis and a comparison to the electronic, and there was a paper published, and I'm sure it was after Fred's death, but I'm sure he would have been quite pleased with his inspirational prodding to me and these students. It's a pleasure and honor to introduce Jay Jordan, the President and CEO of OCLC Online Computer Library Center. Jay became the 4th president in OCL's 43-year history in May 1998. Jay has overseen a period of remarkable growth for OCLC. Since 1998, the number of libraries participating in the OCLC cooperative has grown from 30,000 to more than 72,000. The number of participating institutions outside the U.S. has increased from 3,200 in 64 countries to 16,215 in 170 countries. That's pretty much everybody. WorldCat, the OCLC bibliographic database, has grown from 38 million records to more than 175 million. The number of library location listings attached to those records has increased from 668 million to over 1.5 billion. Under Jay's leadership, OCLC has built a new technological platform, including new web-scale services, created a library advocacy program, and introduced new initiatives to make library holdings and libraries more visible on the open web. Please join me in welcoming Jay Jordan.
So, thank you very much. I tried to only let the short resume out, so I apologize. I too was privileged to have encountered Mr. Kilgour on a number of occasions, and I use the word visionary very infrequently, but it certainly fits in his case. And we're working on some cloud computing ideas right now. That's the big development thing at OCLC, and it was part of Fred's original plan, so we're wherever you are, Fred. I'm sorry it took us 42 years to get to step 6 in your grand plan. Amazing. Anyway, so this is not about Fred or Jay. Today we really are privileged to have an individual who I've been privileged to know for a while. Lee Dirks, the Director of Education and Scholarly Communications in Microsoft's External Research Division, where he manages a variety of research programs related to open access, to research data, interoperability of archives and repositories, preservation of digital information, as well as the application of new technologies to facilitate teaching and learning in higher education. A 20-year veteran across multiple information management fields. As Gary said, Lee holds an MLS degree from the University of North Carolina here at Chapel Hill, as well as a postmaster's degree in preservation administration from Columbia University. In addition to past positions at Columbia and with OCLC Preservation Resources, Lee has held a variety of roles at Microsoft since joining the company in 1996, namely as the corporate archivist, then corporate librarian, and as a senior manager in the corporate market research organization. During his career, his team's work on the http://library. Do I really have to read that? Anyway, you guys know what that is. Internet site at Microsoft was recognized as a Center of Excellence Award for Technology in 2003 by the Special Libraries Association. Lee was presented in 2006 the Microsoft Marketing Excellence Award by Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer for a marketing and engineering partnership around a breakthrough market opportunity analysis process, which is now a standard operating procedure across Microsoft. In addition to participation on several U.S. National Science Foundation task forces, Lee also teaches as adjunct faculty at the iSchool at the University of Washington and serves on advisory boards for the University of Washington, University of Washington iSchool, Master of Science in Information Science program, and the Metadata Research Center at the School of Information and Library Science here at UNC Chapel Hill. Lee, welcome.
It's an understatement for me to say what a humbling honor it is to have been invited to come back to my alma mater and to give this presentation. So thank you very much to Jay, to Gary, and to Barbara for the invitation, to Wanda, wherever you are, for all of your work. Thank you, Wanda, for making all of this happen. I thought by way of explanation, very quickly, I'm going to hopefully keep the references to Microsoft pretty brief, but for context, a lot of people might be wondering what the heck Microsoft is doing with libraries and why they care. The team that I report into, the division that I report into, is called Microsoft Research. It is an organization of about 900 employees. Typically, the typical profile, I'd say about 850 of those 900 people are PhDs in computer science, top of their field, variety of fields in computer science. The team that I report into is actually called External Research, and we are, as you might guess, not PhDs in computer science, but we're responsible for program managing research that Microsoft is interested in, but we realize that we may not be the experts. And so we do this, we undertake programs of research that we actually do in collaboration externally, typically with academia, but not exclusively. So you'll see a little bit of kind of the explanation there that we definitely intend to do this research via partnerships and collaboration. We obviously are, because we're in research, are looking to do groundbreaking research, usually in advanced technologies. The one that throws a lot of people is that we're committed to interoperability, something you probably wouldn't think of hearing from Microsoft maybe a few years ago, but it is a tremendous focus of our area and actually within Microsoft now overall. I'm going to present a little bit of text here. I'm curious if anyone might be familiar with this. It's written, could have been written yesterday. It actually happens to have been written in 1945. And it's talking about, and people are probably very familiar with Vannevar Bush's As We May Think, but he was bemoaning the fact in 1945 that he had a hard time sifting through material and finding what he needed to in the scholarly record to get his job done. And the mind boggles, as a matter of fact, literally and figuratively, to think about the information change that has happened since 1945. This is making reference to a study that was recently released by UCSD. And this is, if you'll make a note of it, all of the figures that are being referenced here are talking about information other than work, which is an unbelievable amount. So what's represented there in the brain is what a typical individual is exposed to in a day, and then the 3.6 zettabytes is what America's unleashed on America on a daily basis, and that is not work-related material. So it's an unbelievable amount of information. So that's what we're exposed to as individuals. We're all very familiar with the concept of data deluge, the tidal wave, big data. And this represents, in many cases, this is something we've been familiar with this concept for decades. Vannevar Bush was obviously first familiar with it. But it is really starting to get to be at a point where we cannot ignore it. And I think we've been, frankly, in a situation where we've been able to kind of muddle through and ignore it or deal with it in very minor ways. We are now at a situation where it is super critical, and we cannot face ignoring it any longer. And as Gary and I were discussing yesterday, we can look at this as a challenge, as a problem, or we can look at this as an opportunity. So I'm going to spend the time today talking about the various opportunities that present us here. I do want to spend a couple of seconds making reference to Jim Gray and a book that was recently published by Microsoft Research. Jim Gray was a researcher in our group for many years. Some of you might know he mysteriously disappeared at sea about 2 years ago, a little bit over 3 years ago now. And it was a tremendous loss. He was actually on my interview loop, and it was someone I was actually very, very looking forward to working with. I'd met him several times on the phone, but he disappeared at sea. But he was speaking of visionaries, he is someone that I would absolutely characterized as a visionary, and someone that transcended, even though he worked at Microsoft, he had friends across the industry, very deep relationships. And he was someone that brought the concept of e-science to Microsoft, and it has continued to carry on even after his disappearance. One of the things that he presented in one of his last presentations in 2007 was making reference to this concept of a fourth research paradigm. The first three paradigms being experimental science, theoretical science, and computational science. And he was convinced that we are now entering a data-intensive science mode. And this is fundamentally what has driven the research mandate in many ways for our group. Over the course of the last couple of years, we were able to pull together a publication, and this was actually published in October of 2009. And it is, in many ways, a tribute to Jim, realizing his vision, capturing a lot of the research that was done by him or his disciples. It was edited by Tony Hay, who is our corporate vice president, and two other colleagues. It's about a 300-page book. It's a free book, and I'll give you the URL in a minute. So it's Creative Commons license. All of the authors signed up for that. It's a free publication. You can download the PDF. It's been getting a tremendous response from the community. It's an edited collection of about 26 papers divided into 4 sections. I was honored to have been asked to edit specifically the scholarly communication side and section, and about 70 authors from around the world. So I would encourage you. I mention this as kind of a backdrop. If you're interested in some of the aspects of the talk that I give today, this is certainly a resource that I would point you to. So again, what about libraries? A lot of what the group does, external research, is broken into categories, what we refer to as themes. One is called health and well-being, another is earth, energy, environment, another is core computer science, and these are the areas of research that we look at. And as you note from my title, I'm responsible for education and scholarly communications, and incorporated in that, and specifically why I was asked to apply for the position, was my background in libraries and archives. And so if you could have told me that I'd been, when I was getting my master's degree here, if you would have told me I'd have a job at Microsoft Research working with libraries, I would have laughed. There's absolutely no way I would have anticipated that. And yet we see libraries as a absolutely crucial component in the scholarly communication life cycle. And so that is what is going to inform a lot of the part of my talk today. I spent a lot of time connecting with scholarly journals, scholarly societies, libraries, archives, and scholars around the world. And we take this very seriously, and we think libraries have a crucial role to play in the future. When we think about the data deluge, I think no one puts it more succinctly and appropriately than Clay Sharkey, who pointed out for us a couple of years ago, it's not information overload that is the problem, it's filter failure. And this is, in a lot of ways, I would say, the role of librarians to address and to fix. We've done a tremendous job for, millennia, and I'd say in the last, we'll say 50 years, we need to be doing a much better job. I think we're a couple of steps behind. I've got a couple of graphs here that I think Vannevar Bush would have probably been, shocked to see how much worse the situation has gotten. The next two slides, I'd like to point out some interesting developments that I've noticed from around the world. This from the world of public libraries. I was amazed. This is from December. A report came out by the British Minister of Culture, Margaret Hodge, who released an entire report. First off, I'm always amazed. England has a Minister of Culture. I think that's something we should probably get to. And on top of that minister released a report on the future of libraries and how libraries are crucial to the UK and how they need to develop, and literally laid out the significant challenges. I was amazed by that, and I was also specifically enjoyed this quote that libraries are sleepwalking into the era of the iPhone, the e-book, and the Xbox without a strategy. And we run the risk of turning the library service into a curiosity of history, such as telex machines or typewriters. So it's good to know that there are people in strategic places that are recognizing the situation. Likewise, and a thing that was even more shocking to me was March 22nd. I don't know how many of you saw this, but the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, in a speech, in a policy speech around Britain's digital future, made reference to the semantic web and launched a £30 million institute on the the Institute of Web Science. So some of the references are here. Tremendous that, I'm trying to think of George Bush maybe giving this presentation. It's just mind-boggling to think about that. I can see Obama doing it maybe, but it's unbelievable that the things that I couldn't even have imagined in discussion when I was here for my master's degree are now, major policy initiatives around the world. When Tim Berners-Lee is coming up in normal policy discussions in the UK, it's tremendous. So as I was referencing, I feel like we're a couple of steps behind, and over the last few decades, for all of our best intentions, I think we're losing ground, and we need to start making that up. I'll take my Microsoft research hat off for a second, and I'll put my librarian hat firmly on. And I think about commercial entities have stepped into our space, and there's a huge business opportunity, or they would not be there. Clearly, they're doing an amazing job, and they are doing it. And it could be Google, it could be Yahoo, it could be Microsoft, from a search and information retrieval, discovery standpoint. From Google, even doing book scanning and monetizing that and providing advertising. It's a tremendous opportunity that I would say could be ours and could still yet be. Likewise, we have even other academic domains creeping into our role, and so in a place where an opportunity that I think we've perhaps lost or not paid enough attention to, you have things like chem informatics and bioinformatics, and scientists literally around the world who could benefit from working with and engaging with librarians on a much deeper level. I think a very tangible example of that is the recent climate information situation in East Anglia, where scientists, had some mistakes and some mishandling of their information. And I wonder if I think the situation would have been different if librarians had been involved in categorizing, protecting, and making sure that information was valid and available in an appropriate way. So I'm very concerned with the fact that we're being disintermediated from our traditional role. And so what I'd like to propose over the course of the next few minutes is talking about some things that I think we can do. So I have several points I'd like to make. I think that we have to reinvent ourselves with technology. We've done this in the past. I think there's no better example of that than Fred Kilgour. I think he is someone that obviously took us into the first generation and did this in an amazing way. Now that said, I think the time has come again to take that and take it to another level. I think we are starting to see examples of this, but in many ways. But I think there's a huge opportunity for librarians, especially in human-computer interaction, visualization, and analysis of data. there's a huge opportunity for us, and we can incorporate this into our schools, we can incorporate this in our jobs, but we really need to step up in this area. And this, frankly, librarians have never been, bastions of kind of user interface excellence, and I think we really need to step up our education and our training in that area. So, something that Jay probably thinks about every morning, the question he asks himself is, today, like, what would Fred do? And so, to make a reference, obviously what he did is, he established a network. He built a network that linked libraries, and likewise, that network now exists. We can now stand on the shoulders of giants in many ways, but the next situation that's come to us is to, and we've done an amazing job with metadata, but I think the future is more looking at the actual data. And so I'll spend a lot of time talking about the opportunities with data. But we now need to, instead of linking libraries or linking metadata, I think we need to go another step, and frankly a much harder step in working on linking data and linking, in fact, linking people. So we need to take up the semantic challenge. I'll be spending some time about that. What we have for many years been saying, in the future there's going to be an explosion. It's the present. It is now. It is actually yesterday in many ways. And so we need to work very hard to figure out how we can develop our capabilities, again, within a library program and then on our day-to-day jobs, how we can mine, how we can search, how we can analyze, and make this available. As I mentioned, we have the ability to take advantage of a lot of the resources that are made available to us now. These are things that in the past, in fact, OCLC has spent an immense amount of time and will continue to, but it's spent an immense amount of time building out infrastructure, and that's something that libraries have had to do for quite a bit, and spend a lot of our time, spend a lot of our money in that area. And we have a situation developing with cloud computing where we can really start to focus more on the value-added aspects of our job and less about the infrastructure and maintenance aspects of our job. And this is an opportunity that we need to take serious advantage of. To detail the 3 layers of cloud computing that I'll make reference to, the basic kind of bare metal utility computing or infrastructure level. More where I'll spend my time talking about is the platform as a service, the platform level, and more specifically even on top of that is end-user applications and the software. The fact that, the thing that most of us are aware of in terms of our consumer and day-to-day experience. But these would be the three main types of cloud computing. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on the rationale. I think this is quite sane, very, very reasonable applications. There's enumeration of reasons that we can deal with this, but I think first and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, this affords us the opportunity to spend the time on the stuff that we're good at and outsource or make available in the cloud the things that we're not good at or we're not expert at. So I definitely encourage, for those of you that might be thinking cloud computing, what is that, et cetera, this is definitely something that is very real. I know a lot of people have dabbled with the Amazon services. Those are tremendous. And you're starting to see other platforms develop, Microsoft, eBay, et cetera. A lot of other things are out there. I definitely encourage you to start experimentation, start small. In a lot of cases, what we see a lot of is research scientists in their labs, literally with their credit cards, logging on and starting to store and do compute in that way. And it's better to start experimenting small and to get that experience as soon as possible. Now that said, the cloud landscape is still very much developing, even though Microsoft, quote unquote, has had a cloud solution for about 18 months. Still, a lot of people are hesitant to make the leap and to join in. Now, that said, everyone is familiar, I would think, with Flickr. Are people familiar with SmugMug? So, 3 or 4 people. SmugMug is Flickr that's run out on a cloud. It is literally, whereas Flickr owns its own infrastructure, SmugMug is a version of Flickr that has no infrastructure. It's completely run on Amazon. And it's these sorts of things, and this is something that would make a lot of businesses extremely nervous, right? To not be in any kind of control over your infrastructure. But we're starting to see a sea change in the way people think about their infrastructure and worry about where their core competencies are and where their money is best spent. But there's a fascinating number of cloud computing options that are out there. Obviously, we're familiar with YouTube, Cyvi, Viddler, Bioscreen, Cast, Journal of Online Visualized Experiments, JOVE. There's a handful of fantastic scholarly communication solutions that are made available in the cloud. SlideShare, obviously Google Docs, and then again, the thing that most people are familiar with, Amazon's S3 and EC2. Now, the thing that affords us the most tremendous opportunity sitting on top of cloud computing is the idea of being able to take advantage of semantic computing. And I'm mentioning here just ever so briefly, obviously, Tim Berners-Lee's the 4 principles for linked data. I will not be delving into that in any level of detail, but saying that some of the points I'll be making will build upon this. Some colleagues of mine actually published this paper, the idea of a smart infrastructure for research. And I'll make reference to semantic computing here. Obviously, there's an increasing requirement for automating the tools that we work with on a day-to-day basis to navigate this immense amount of research data. And the second point is natural language moving forward. Natural language may not be adequate to convey the meaning of a word or an expression, especially in the scientific world. And this is a baffling concept. This is something we probably could have spent a few minutes talking with Vannevar Bush about. But the idea that moving forward, obviously, individuals cannot process those number of papers, and that computing power and computing strength has gotten to such a point that it can process and analyze and bring so many more tools to bear on these, and they can draw connections between relationships and papers, things that humans will not ever be able to process in time. So we need to really start taking advantage of this. So, and I'll make the distinction here between semantic computing and semantic web. Semantic web, I think, in a lot of ways is one manifestation. I think we need to look at the larger concept of semantic computing. And we're familiar with, collective intelligence and crowdsourcing. And there's a lot of fantastic technologies that certainly take advantage of this. Last.fm, Conatia, Faculty of 1,000, things that can help recommend. But the breakthrough that we're going to start seeing more and more is not things that were selected for me because other people use them. They're going to be selected for me because a computer thought, based on the aboutness of a document or the concepts that were in the document, are going to start recommending it. It's going to be a tremendous boon. We're going to, obviously, there's going to be some rough years. But I think a point that I really want to make here is this isn't going to happen by itself. And a lot of people, for 10 years, we've been talking about the semantic web and semantic computing. And this is something literally that we have to build. This is something we need to be making sure that we teach and teach very, very strongly in schools. This is something we need to be taking very seriously. It isn't going to happen just overnight. And there's a lot of ways, yes, you can reverse engineer and make the little things happen, but this is something we need to start building even at the authoring level. And I'll be giving you some examples of that. Silly perhaps, but my concept here being that you can, if you really, really want your paper, your document, your research objects, your information to get out there, you need to enable it to be found, and not found by individuals. Just sending it to your friends or hoping that someone clicks on the journal and finds it is not the future. The future is enabling that paper to be found and crawled in a machine-readable form. So we're looking forward to a world where all data is linked, and papers are able to be parsed, not just the abstract, but the entire paper, the concepts that are embedded in the paper, the data that's embedded in the spreadsheet that's embedded in the paper, etc. We need to be able to pull all that information out, correlate it, draw the links between that, and then link that to all the other papers and all the other data sets that are around. And only then, and we're not going to be able to do that based on our current infrastructure and machines that we have around. This is something that we're going to need to be capitalizing on the availability of computational power and storage area in the cloud. The terrifying thing is as advanced as we are, and as much as we like to think about, cloud computing and semantic computing, Joe Hellerstein at Berkeley writes a fantastic blog, and I highlight this one because he really points out that we're not even in the industrial revolution of data yet. We have not even reached that stage. We're still very much embedded, early probably in the cottage industry stage, and so we have miles to go before we can claim that we are really moving forward. The second concept that I want to draw on is to be entrepreneurial. And for this, again, if I think back to my first year of getting my master's degree, my major textbook was Bob Taylor's Value-Added Processes and Information Systems. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I did not like that book. It was a rather boring book. And yet when I went back to teach at the iSchool at University of Washington, I dusted it off, and I had several conversations with the Dean Emeritus there, Michael Eisenberg, and he shined a new light on this book for me. And it was tremendous, and I will use Visionary for a second time, 3 times today. Bob was unbelievable, and I will point specifically to a table from that book, Figure 4.2, which I spent a lot of time looking at, where he called out, the user criteria of choice, these larger categories, interfaces, and I'm specifically calling out this is the column where he said this is the value that is added or can be added in these areas. And then his examples, the systems, the value-added processes. Now, the larger category, the user criteria of choice, these frequently do not change. And this is just another point to make here. He was writing this in the early 80s. This is long before, networks did exist, but the exposure to networks and the idea of the internet was obviously a decade away or so. And it was tremendous, the thinking that he did behind this to break this out. Now, the reason I call this out is Mike Eisenberg and I have spent some time revising this. And we actually gave a paper at the iConference a couple of years ago at UCLA, and where we're trying to evolve this model. And this is actually the version that we gave in the paper a couple of years ago. It's going to evolve a little bit further. We're working with some additional colleagues at the University of Washington. But we've started to use this as literally, I like to think of it as a checklist that you can use to figure out how you're going to add value. If you're trying to assess a system that you have, if you're trying to assess some of the classes at University of Washington have used this to analyze websites, to look at processes within their information delivery mechanisms inside organizations. You can literally use this as a checklist to go against and to do a gap analysis around what are we doing, why are we not doing it well enough, what should we be doing, etc. This will, I can provide the citation for this, but this is an opportunity that I think, going back to Taylor's paper in 1986, or book in 1986, is a way you can reorganize this and literally start to think about what we need to do and how we need to reposition ourselves, how we need to make and improve the systems that we have now and make them better. This is just another graphic that we have from the paper. So that's an example of some perhaps tools that we can use as individuals. In terms of working with data, I also wanted to call out some, I think, tremendous services that are available from the commercial sector. I'm assuming you've heard of some of these, perhaps not all of them, but Swivel, MiniEyes, Gapminder, Freebase, Illustrata. These are different examples, in some cases from Google, from IBM, from MetaWeb, from publishers. And this is, again, an amazing thing. We have been, as librarians, we've been capturing published, in most cases, published material, and that data that we do not create, right? We've been applying the metadata and building on top of that. But the huge opportunity, and to restate again, is for us to start seeking out the unique materials, and I'll delve into this a little bit more, but finding literally the data itself and adding value on top of that. And these are the kind of services that I think we can be pointing to in the meantime. We might need to develop if necessary, but to facilitate literally data analysis and data visualization, because more and more we need to get down to a data level and show our ability to add value at that level. Some examples, not from the commercial area, but more from the academic side, are 2 efforts. One is DataSite, which is primarily the TIB in Germany, along with the British Library. But I think it's a small group that's basically getting DOIs and starting to assign that to data sets and store and handle that. It's literally just started officially in December, but it's growing quite fast. And another effort, the Dataverse Network, this is out of Harvard. And this is basically a service that was initially, and it started out of the social sciences at Harvard, where they just said, okay, our scholars have been publishing papers, and the data hasn't been going anywhere. We now need to start keeping this data and making it available for the scholars in a cloud service, frankly, in a way that they don't have to worry about it. They can publish the paper, put the data over here, they get a unique identifier that they can share with their colleagues or share with the paper. But these are both, I think, fantastic kind of grassroots efforts that have happened by libraries for libraries and are starting to catch the attention of publishers. Another fantastic example of adding value and owning content, taking responsibility for that content is an organization, or I guess you could call it, characterize it as an organization, but a group of libraries called Worldwide Science Started-to-Work. And this is, I think at this point, it's somewhere between, it's probably getting close to about 60 libraries around the world that have responsibility for scientific and technical information for their countries. So in the United States, it's the Department of Energy, in UK, it's British Library, but there's about 60 different libraries that have banded together and said, we could just individually keep doing what we're doing, or we could band together and focus on one search solution, federate our collections, and make it available via this portal. And they are making a decision right now to actually not make it available to the commercial search engines, but say you've got to come to us. But they're doing some amazing work. But I like it because these guys they know their data better than anyone, and they are taking responsibility for serving it up and making it available. It's literally like a United Nations of scientific and technical information. It's a tremendous effort. So I've already touched on a couple of these. I've mentioned this several times, but my third major point is to tackle the tough items and to find the difficult collections. And I argue in many ways we've spent decades or hundreds of years on the easy stuff, and the hard stuff is all around us. It's in servers underneath our desk or underneath the desk of our colleagues. It's in our special collections. It's in our archives. And this is the place literally where we're going to make the difference. Commercial organizations and publishers are going to be taking responsibility for or should and can take responsibility for the published material. And I think the value add that librarians can bring is finding this material. It can be data, it can be gray literature, as I mentioned, archives and special collections, out of copyright material, etc. But finding this information and service and spending our effort on these unique items. And so for this, I say servers are the new shelves. And I think that we need to refocus our efforts not on the printed items, but on everything else. Another example is data feeds, as it were. Data.gov is something many of you are familiar with. But there's an opportunity for us, for librarians, to look across the environment and find free sources of data and bundle that and mash that up with our existing things. This is something that we've done in the past at IHS. And a lot of sources are making, via APIs, and are making their data available. And this is another opportunity for you to take your collection and mash it up and to connect it with other collections and add value in that way. My fourth point is to focus on sustainability. And this is not a new point. At least it shouldn't be, and yet it always seems to be. Microsoft, in my role, we spend a lot of time. We do in our joint research projects. We do connect with people and fund research, and we always make a huge point of saying two things. One is we're not going to continue funding beyond the stated term of the project, and secondly, what is your sustainability plan? And it's shocking to me how many people don't have a sustainability plan, or their sustainability plan is we'll open source the software. And frankly, even though I'm at Microsoft, all my projects are open source. All the projects that my team does, but simply open sourcing a project is not a sustainability plan. It is not even a preservation plan. For this purpose, I'm going to focus a little bit specifically in the area of preservation and give some examples here. I was very happy and honored to be invited to participate in the Blue Ribbon Task Force on Sustainable Digital Preservation. This is a 2-year task force that was chartered by the groups that you'll see there, mainly NSF, OCLC, and the Mellon Foundation, but several others participated as well. And it was a tremendous experience. There was about 20 of us on the task force. And it was not around digital preservation, it was around sustainable planning and economics for how to incent and how to encourage preservation. Now, the amazing thing about this report is you can literally take the word preservation out and put any other library function in, and the same tenets are going to be very, very relevant. And so this is, again, a free download. I would encourage you very much to find a copy of this report. It was just released about 6 weeks or 8 weeks ago. And we had a fantastic event about 2 weeks ago where we launched it in DC, which is also available on the web via the URL. But, you know, part of the sustainability model, and there's not just, obviously there's not one, the report is full of a multitude of different approaches. But in every situation, whatever, you need to be able to articulate a compelling value proposition for the work that you're undertaking. You need to provide clear incentives to, whether it be the funder or the people that are somehow impacted, the stakeholders. And then it is crucial to define the roles and responsibilities for all parts and all parties that are involved in that. And these, you know, I'm sorry, these sound very basic concepts, but it's shocking to me how many people do not think about these things, you know, at the beginning of a project. And if you want your project to have life beyond the funding or beyond your current job, or if you happen to transition, et cetera, it is crucial that you line up these, you know, you get alignment between your value proposition, the values that are being added, the incentives for the people that are around, and the roles and responsibilities. And in some ways it's very simple, and yet it still tends to be very elusive in the academic community. Another, I think a fantastic example of something we're kind of seeing emerge right now is from the DuraSpace organization, which is the recent merger between Fedora and DSpace. They formed a new entity called DuraSpace, and one of their new, I think, planned lines of business is something called DuraCloud. And this is a tremendous example of a team that started to think about sustainability from the word go, and are doing a fantastic job of thinking about cloud computing. And what these guys are doing is, bear with me here for a split second, on this level, you can imagine up here being basically institutional repositories or any digital repository of academic or research material. This would, you know, could be anywhere from the known probably 2,000 institutional repositories worldwide to fundamentally any digital repository on an academic campus. So say you want to back up your material, you would be contacting the DuraCloud organization. So what they have here is what they're referring to as the Durable Store Service Layer. You would sign an SLA, a service level agreement with the DuraCloud organization, and you would say, I want to keep my material with you, I want to keep it in a dark archive, I want to keep it with you for 5 years or 10 years, whatever the terms of the contract are. And you can specify even, I want to keep it, I want to have my data in this country, or I want my data spread across 3 continents for preservation. They will be behind the scenes. DuraCloud will be signing an SLA, again, a service level agreement with any number of cloud providers behind the scenes. So Microsoft could be one, Google, eBay, anyone that could be on there. At the end of the day, this layer doesn't care about this layer, right? All you care is that you have an agreement signed here and that these guys are doing their job. And so the players underneath, the cloud service providers, one could go out of business and 2 more could take its place. And so it's a fantastic way for the preservation community to start saying, hey, we're going to think about this and we're going to leverage the infrastructure that we don't have to build now, that we can stand on this commercial. So there's certainly payment that has to happen. So the business model is certainly going to be a subscription model for signing up for this. But it's still a fantastic way to bring preservation to academic campuses in a very simple way. My 5th point is leverage the familiar. And here what I'm making reference to is very frequently I see people who have an idea and they want to start building that idea from scratch. And they think no one else has ever done it. Typically, someone else has done it. Someone might have even done it better. But at the end of the day, even if someone else has done it, look around and instead of building something from scratch, you can't always do this, but whenever you can, build on something that already exists. And so my example here, let's take scholarly articles and writing papers. So this is a few slides from my normal deck, but one can imagine in the future a paper not being the paper as we know it now, not being in a printed journal, but you have the ability to embed the data in the document. You have interactive figures, things that are literally updated live. You have the ability to collaborate on that document live in collaboration with other people. Dynamic documents that are loaded and have APIs embedded in, and you're able to work with them, and might even have ratings and influence and comments, etc. You're starting to see articles of the future like this crop up at PLOS, at Elsevier, etc. Some of those examples: Elsevier's article of the future. PLOS is doing work with currents. Nature Proceedings has this. There's some promise of Google Wave to offer some of these things, and some tremendous work of the small company called Mendeley in the UK. But the idea before us is this isn't just going to happen, and I know, I spend a lot of time talking to scholarly publishers, that they're very slow to make this happen. Some are moving that direction, but I argue that there is an opportunity, a significant opportunity, for librarians to play a significant role in this part of the process. And so we need to see what we can do to encourage a rich authoring environment. We need to be able to unlock documents and move them from being what we think of now as static summaries to being very much living information vehicles. We need to be able to capture semantically rich information and make sure that that is transported with the document and consumed by machines. Facilitate this idea of reproducible research. My data travels with the paper. Another scientist can get that data and apply their methodology to it, or get their methodology and get my methodology and apply their data to it. And then enable the value-added services to be added on top of that. So again, I see a role for librarians in participating in this. And by that, I'll give, and this is my one kind of link to a few of the efforts that we have underway at Microsoft Research. Very briefly, of what we've been doing, and this what I'm talking about is leveraging the familiar, is instead of saying let's build a whole new application from scratch, we are looking at certain areas. For instance, in these cases, zip by Creative Commons. Say you wanted to embed Creative Commons in a paper. Well, right now you have your paper, you go get the Creative Commons, and you literally embed a GIF or something into the document. We have now facilitated from within the Word document. You literally push a button, it goes to the Creative Commons website, pulls that license down. You have the ability to tweak that license. It embeds it as an image in the document, but it also embeds it in RDF and XML behind the scenes, and that travels with the document. In a very similar way, we have something that we developed first with Phil Bourne at UCSD, but also I did some later subsequent work with John Wilbanks at Science Commons, where we're able to consume biological, in this particular instance, biological ontologies. Those that are made available in a web way, we can pull them down into the document, and as you can kind of, sorry, it zipped ahead. As you can kind of see here, what we're doing is walking the document not unlike you would for spell check, except what it's done is you've written a biology paper, it's pulled the ontology into the Word document and literally lights it up like spell check. And so you can go through and disambiguate the term and say, yes, this is the term I wanted. No, this is not the term I wanted. And literally it's tagging up, again, in XML, RDF, behind the scenes, and that travels with the paper. So it can be easily consumed by upon deposit by a database, or it can be easily consumed by a manuscript submission system. Greatly, or a library cataloging system. I would say add that as well, obviously. And you'll see in each of these cases, I'll just make the point that all of these are made available for free. These are all free add-ins that are available from our team. In most cases, we actually are making the source code available as well. And this is our effort to the community to say you can build anything like this. The community, these are all public APIs that you can work with Office. This particular case, we've had about 150,000 downloads, 4,000 downloads of the ontology add-in. This is a chemistry add-in that we just actually released 2 weeks ago, and we already have over 50,000 downloads of this. And this is something we did in conjunction with Peter Murray Rust at Cambridge. And so just to reiterate, what I'm trying to get at here is there's no need for you to build a lot of this infrastructure if you can use tools that are familiar to you already. In this particular case, Word or Office, you can be doing the same kind of add-ins into browsers, into Firefox, right? It's simple enough to build these add-ins. So don't build your infrastructure from scratch. Leverage what is already there. Most importantly, leverage what your community is already comfortable in an environment they know how to use. This is just an example of an article authoring add-in that we built. This one, actually, the example that I'll point out here, we've actually, if I can get here we go. This little button right here, this is just a slide, but this little button says upload. And via the SWORD protocol that was developed by JISC in the UK, we're able to, from your Word document, actually upload this straight into a repository campus. So if you have DSpace, Fedora, ePrints, or Microsoft has a version of a repository called Zinity, you're able to literally, from your Word, from your office, be able to push it straight into a repository. My point number 6 is to reach out across campus and maybe beyond. My point here is it is so incredibly important for us to get out of our silos, to push away from our desk and get up and walk out of the library and walk into the other departments on campus. And we do this sometimes we're forced to do this, and cross-campus task forces, etc. But I argue that we should be doing this proactively. We should be going into the IT teams. We should be working with scientists and the doctors around campus and setting up. And the way I like to think about it is, instead of as a librarian, as an academic librarian, walking into a department and saying, okay, we need to cut your serials budget. Where do you want to start cutting? I'd rather walk in and say, how am I going to start making your data available to you and to your colleagues? I'd like to change that dialogue. And so I just think it's very important that we think about reaching out and working with our colleagues in these areas. I think, again, a testament to Fred Kilgour. He did very much this, and he started small, started with a few libraries in Ohio, and it's tremendous the work that he did, and frankly the work. If you look at the numbers of what Jay and his organization have done, and since his tenure, it's mind-boggling the progress that they've made. I would stress very much, and this will probably get me fired when I go back to campus, back to Microsoft, but as much as everything I've been talking about up to this point has been saying, software, do this, do that, build these services, value added, at the end of the day, it comes down to the relationships that you make and the relationships that you can build with people, in your work groups, in the departments across campus, in other campuses around the state or around the world. And I cannot stress to you how you need to think very big. And it's I've been fortunate to work at Microsoft, and we think at a bigger scale, but I'm always amazed at how small the world is. And it's very simple to contact someone at another library school or another library and talk about, I'm good at this, but I know they're good at that. Maybe we should work together. And it starts with a conversation. So I would encourage you to do that. And lastly, my last point is to change the way that we educate our field. I think that my education was tremendous, and yet I think every day since I left this campus, how much I owe to the school, and yet how much I would like to give back to the community. And I've been lucky enough to be invited to be on the Board of Visitors here, as well as an advisory board at the University of Washington. So I do spend a lot of my time thinking about what we can do to make library education better. I think the slide that I've got here is, I think it's a tremendous effort has happened in the last few years. The development of the iSchool Caucus and the annual iConference. This is fantastic, and yet I encourage all of you to think about what could be done better and give that feedback to your library school, whether it's this one or anyone that you graduated. But think about what you need to know in your job now, and what you would recommend that other students could benefit from. And this is, it can be very, very practical. This is some of the feedback that I give both of the boards that I advise on. But there's many things that that weren't taught that I think need to be incorporated into curriculum. Things like contract negotiation, budgeting, people management. Things that it's hard to do in a classroom, and yet you have to start somewhere. You can provide some real world examples of these. And so my encouragement here is that if you have a passion about your field overall, then you need to have a passion about the way that we educate people moving forward. And so to definitely give back to your school. So in summary, I think that we need to reinvent ourselves with technology. And I say again, we've done this before. We need to do it again. We need to take it up a level. And I'm convinced that we can. This is, in a lot of ways, a lot of these, when you look at them now, are going to interoperate. Meaning, the way we reinvent ourselves is going to be very focused on the way, number 7, for instance, as we educate the field. To be entrepreneurial, we need to take chances. We need to think about thinking outside of our group and how we can partner with other people and how we can add value, how we can make our current services better, and how we can extend the role of the librarian into the next field of information management. We need to tackle the tough items. Enough of picking the low-hanging fruit. I think we need to start picking the stuff that's at the top of the tree and make a difference. We need to focus on sustainability. We need to think about what the business model is and how that's really going to work. I think that the time of build it and they will come, that sounds good, it's nice, and every so often it works, but most of the time it doesn't. I think we know that. We need to leverage the familiar whenever possible. Sometimes it's not possible, I understand that. We need to, sometimes building from scratch is important into prototyping that way, but if ever possible, just work on the top layer and don't worry about rebuilding the entire infrastructure. And reach out across campuses, as I said, build partnerships, work in collaboration with people. A lot of times we're scared about having dependencies on other parties, and yet I would say that that's sometimes the crucial, that we need to lean on other people. And again, we're not the best folks in a certain area, and we need to find those other experts and say, how can we complement and work together? And then change the way that we educate. And as a kind of a scary last thought, this is a thought I keep in mind every day. Thank you very much.